So how does the Curious Lion Learning Flywheel achieve this? We've thought long and hard about this, and the starting point is to identify 4 key roles within your company. These are learners, their peers, and those two are interchangeable, the experts, and the teachers. As you can see in this diagram, learners learn from their peers, and through a process of deliberate practice, they become experts. Of course, you as the talent development team can always introduce experts early on to set this flywheel up. Internal experts, by sharing their knowledge, become teachers, and of course, external experts that you bring in as hired help can often step right into that role of facilitator as teachers. And finally, the beauty of this setting it up internally and relying on internal experts is that by teaching, you are learning. And so the cycle is complete as experts share their knowledge with learners, learning again from their peers in these communities of learning. The way we package and deliver this training is in learning sprints. Think of this as the pacing, the meaningful chunks in which you break down the process of learning information, practicing that information, getting feedback on your practice, and reflection. We'll come back to all of these points in a moment. There are 10 steps to this process that are worth spending a little bit of time on. We'll use this signpost over here to go through those. So real quick, just to introduce all 10 of them, we start with identifying the topics needed for your flywheel. Next up, you want to pre-train people on the concepts, ideas, and definitions that they're going to need to apply later. Then you want to provide opportunities for reflection early and often. Here's where the journey groups come in. You want to bring people together to discuss the principles that they learned about in the pre-training. Then you want to give them a safe environment to practice with their peers. And once they've had time to practice, you want to get them to take real-world action. You need to provide the time and the accountability for them to take that action. After real-world action, it's really important to have time for reflection, to learn from what just happened. Then you bring people together again to share their best practices of what worked well, what didn't work well. This part is where the real magic starts to happen. Finally, last 2 things, we want to provide ways for learners to monitor their progress. And when this is done visually, it has the biggest impact. And lastly, you want to promote continuous learning through learning nudges. So let's quickly go into each one of those to get a little bit more of a feel for what goes into them. So starting at the top, identifying the topics to feed your flywheel. The key here is topic selection. You want to be really intentional and focus on few versus many. As humans, we have the ability to hold 3 to 5 things in our working memory at any given time. You want to caution against cognitive overload. Minimizing the number of ideas allows people to go a lot deeper into each one of those ideas. Then comes the pre-training. Now, this is often the first and only thing companies do when they think of training. They create a video or they build an e-learning and then deploy that to employees and think that the job is done. Now, of course, it is not done. 72% of employees admit that they do not give their videos the full attention while watching them. Be honest, have you always paid attention fully to every training video you've watched? Probably not. So stopping here would be leaving so much learning on the table. Last thing to say here is that designing really good asynchronous training requires the application of 8 multimedia principles for learning design, which promotes interaction, emotion, and engagement. So now that learners have had the opportunity to process information as pre-training, we want to give them opportunities to reflect. In this step, they typically complete a self-assessment to promote skill awareness and help them identify the gaps or the areas of focus. This process ends with them identifying goals and then starting to take tangible steps towards them as the learning process continues. Armed with the information delivered through pre-training and their reflections on that, they are now ready to meet and to discuss. The key with live sessions is to space them out over many weeks, but to have them every week to maintain momentum. Your employees prepare for these live sessions by watching videos, taking an e-learning, or even listening to a podcast. You want to make time matter. Encouraging live attendance is so important. You want your people to be giving their full attention and taking conscious action. No autopilot. You incorporate the experts from the flywheel to be facilitators and guides to help learners navigate the conversation around the topics being discussed. And finally, the secret ingredient is to use the power of Zoom breakouts if it's a virtual training, or small breakout groups for in-person, to create that safe learning environment where an added benefit is your people start to connect in a vulnerable space. Because let's face it, learning is hard, and learning with other people makes that a lot easier. So at the end of these sessions, your people leave equipped, ready, and motivated to take action. This process moves them from consuming training to creating or doing something. This could be anything. For example, conducting a meeting with a client, having a performance review with a direct report, or even delivering a presentation to the entire company. The key is to leverage accountability mechanisms by having your people make a commitment to each other on what that action is that they're going to take. Once the action has been taken, you want to provide more opportunities for reflection. Having really well thought out reflection prompts, some kind of workbook or space for people to document their thoughts and have that pushed out right after the action has been taken increases the chances of people learning from what they just did. Again, it's all about deliberate practice. Once that reflection has taken place, you want to bring people back together again to discuss what went well and what didn't go well. This might be another short Zoom meeting or in-person meeting in which people get together and in small breakouts of peers, they share what they did and what they learned. Without feedback, either from yourself through reflection or from others through this process of coming together, you can't figure out what you need to do to improve or how close you are to achieving your goals. Once you repeat this process a few times and your employees have had a chance to work through the topics that you've set out for them, you get them to complete their self-assessment again. Here is where the power of visual presentation becomes evident. Because in radar charts like these, learners can see exactly what gaps were closed and which areas they should focus on next. And finally, so that none of this is in vain, you promote the culture of continuous learning that this learning sprint has instilled in people throughout the year. Here we think about using learning nudges sent out via email, via Slack, whatever internal messaging your company uses to get people to reflect and share what they're learning throughout the year. We have seen incredible results from these cohorts where people brought together through the difficult process of learning new skills, put into situations that are slightly outside of their comfort zones, and then finding support and encouragement and feedback and motivation from each other. They tend to stick together, and harnessing the spirit of that cohort permeates throughout your entire company.